Now Bootstrap offers something called Grid, which allows your websites to become more responsive to different size screens and different size browsers. So let me just show you. I've created one, very simple one here. So if I make it smaller, you can see that it's actually very responsive, and they get smaller until a certain point at which they then stack onto a row. So this is really cool, really helpful. I'm going to show you just the basics of how you can get this working. Here's the HTML of it here. I'm just going to remove this and we can work on it together. So as you can see, I've already integrated all of the Bootstrap that's required. So that's the CSS at the top here, and then the JavaScript at the bottom. So essentially what Grid does is it separates the browser screen into, so we have rows and columns. Obviously rows are going down and columns are going horizontally. And the columns are split into 12 equally, which you can assign the divs to however many you want. Here, what I've done is I've given 4 columns to the left one, 4 columns to the middle one, and 4 columns to the right one. Before we get into that, doing it ourselves, I'm just going to show you how I can change that. So I can change that to 2 and change this to 6. So 2 plus 4 plus 6 still equals 12. Here you see the columns have been distributed differently now. So they're always split into 12 different columns, which you can assign the amount to however many you want. I could put in more divs, for example. I could put in, let's say, 6 divs and give them all 2 columns each. So you can do it however you like. Now let's go through how we do this together. So first of all, I just deleted the body tag, so let's make sure that's in there. Remove the closing tag. Okay, so these are all contained in divs. So the first div you have to include in there is the container. That basically is the container for all of your rows. So within this, I'm just going to put in 1 row for now. So 1 div with the class row. And then within this div, what I can then do is I can add in our different columns. So I'll put in another div here. I'll put it onto one line just so it's easier to see. Oops. There we go, that's better. Okay, so in here, this is where you saw I'd put before col, and I'd put -md-4. Now I'll just explain what that means. Col means the columns, so you're saying, I want to assign columns. MD is the size. Now we have 4 different sizes in all. We have XS, which is extra small, SM, which is just small. Then we have MD, which is medium, and LG, which is large. And basically what these mean are for what device sizes you want to make it responsive. So for example, XS refers to the screen size of a mobile phone. SM, you could imagine it being kind of the size of a tablet. MD is like the size of a laptop or a normal desktop. LG are some of the larger screens that you get. So we're going to go for MD because I'm doing this on my laptop, for example. You can do it on any of these different ones and play around with how they look. And then finally, the number is the number of columns we want to assign. So we usually want this to add up to 12. So I'm going to this time, like I say, I'm going to have 4 this time. Let's go for 4. And I'm going to just have far left, middle left, middle right, and then right. So right now, these add up to 16, sorry. We want them to add up to 12. So we could just have 3, 3, 3, 3. I'm going to have 1, 5, 5, 1. So that adds up to 12. That should all work. Now, obviously when I save this, it's going to come up. We won't have any background colors, but you can kind of see that it's starting to work. This has been assigned 1 column here, and you can see that these 2 have a much larger width. And then all I was doing before is, you may remember very early on in the CSS, I was saying that you can also style, we want to always style in a separate CSS file, but sometimes for ease, we can just put it here instead. All we have to do is put style equals, and then we just put in, the property, background dash color blue or whatever. So we can do that if we like, and then that works like that. So I'll just do that quickly. and add that into each of those. So I'll just copy and paste these in. I'll give them all different colours so that it's very obvious to you which one's which. Let's go for brown, and then yellow, and then let's go for orange. Okay, so when I refresh now, they all have their different colours, and it can show you a bit better on what they're covering. Now, one more thing, we can actually change this to container-fluid, and what that will do is that will mean that these now cover the whole size of the browser. So instead of just covering some parts of it. So now if we just make this smaller, you'll see that it's still working, being very responsive, which is great. And so that's the basics of Grid, really. That's how you cover the different columns and make it responsive for any screen or browser size. So just to review what we've done, first of all, of course, we've integrated the CSS at the top here, and we've got the JavaScript here at the bottom from Bootstrap. And then all we have to do is we create a div with a class called container, or container-fluid if we want it to cover the whole screen. We then, within the container, we can add as many rows as we like. So for example, I'll just show you. Let's add in another row, just so you see that we can do this multiple times. We can give this, I don't know, green, pink, red, and we'll just go for white. You can see here that we can have as many rows as we want. So all we have to do is have a div container. Within the container, we want to have a row, and within that row, that's where we can separate the different divs and give them an allotted number of columns that want to add up to 12. We put in col, dash, and then for what browser or device size we want it to be responsive for. So whether that's XS, SM, MD, or LG. And then essentially that's all you have to do, and give it the number of columns. So it's actually quite an intuitive thing to use. It's very helpful. You just have to have a container, and then you add your rows into the container, and then you separate your different divs or your different elements however you want, as long as it adds up to 12, and you can specify the size of it there. So what I recommend you do is have a go yourself. Try and replicate something like this, where you're essentially just creating divs with different background colors that cover a different width. And then once you've done it, you can bask in the glory of being able to move it larger and smaller and see how it looks. So have a go, and then I'll see you in the next lecture.